Hello there and welcome. In this video I got you 10 tips and tricks for a good start in Against the Storm. So we're going to go over a lot of little things that I hope will help you out understanding the dynamics of the game better and getting yourself acquainted with the back and forth of the gameplay loop. So the very first thing that I want to talk about is difficulty-wise, start out with this game as low as you can until you find it boring. This game is, with all its production ways and alternatives, its drafting system, and many other mechanics, very unique. I don't know too many games that I could really completely compare to this, so the bottom line here is starting out low helps you to get the basic systems of the game under control. And once you notice that you win too easily, you can always go for the next difficulty and then the one after. But starting out too high on the difficulty level in this game particularly can really frustrate you out of the door before you even gave this game a proper chance. Number two, an effective starter layout that I always like to introduce, and I don't want to miss it out in this video either. So, first up, buy everyone a shelter. Everybody should get one. Then 2 woodcutters for the people to get started with. Then 1 crude workstation, 1 makeshift post to get the basic materials that you need for various quests and such, and 4 pieces of green decoration to promote your hearth to the first encampment level. This little combination of things gives you everything you require to expand, do your material collection, and the last thing you require are the collector camps for the resources that you have present in your hometown. And that's that. You are, with that, already pretty well set up to go wherever you want to afterwards, and I practically use this setup for every one of my maps unless there's a specific reason not to. Number 3. For beginners, I recommend beavers and humans as the most effective species that you can pick. Beavers excel at woodworking and they love engineering jobs, which makes them happy. Humans excel at agriculture and they are happy by brewing work. These things are really very grateful industries, as mechanistry jobs have really many uses, and brewing jobs of the humans process the agricultural goods that you anyways would allocate. So it's a really good thing. And the other thing is both humans and beavers start with very high resolve levels. Until you get the juggling of resolve levels good under your control, sometimes more fragile species, especially harpies, have a tendency to run you away quite quickly. And yeah, that's that. And the last point, woodworking proficiency of the beavers makes them yield double the income of many of the jobs they're involved, wherever the specialization bonus is in, which means beavers have the chance to give you much more yield. Why is that so cool? Wood is used as primary fuel source for the early game and primary building material for the entirety of the game. Number 4, your first drafts. So when you start out, you get a handful of items that you can draft, and it's always one of the most difficult questions to ask yourself, what the hell am I supposed to pick first? First up, you can take your time with these. They don't go bad, and you are not really pressured in picking anything before you want it. I usually wait until I have uncovered one of the dangerous glades, until I know what I really want to, but more about that in a hot minute. Generally spoken, the first things that you want to draft are sources of food and sources of building materials, namely planks, bricks, and fabric. These 3 materials are pretty dominant to acquire in the early game, because the crude workstation gives you all of these materials, but the quota here, the conversion quota, is rather horrible. With planks, it is okay, sort of, but all of the other materials are rather hard to get by. Rocks for bricks often are even a limited resource on many maps. Altogether, you want to have efficiency on whatever you produce in masses and every colony. Every single colony needs these items in masses. You can't skip on that, regardless of how you build it and which cornerstones you pick. Therefore, early on, focus on food production and on building material production. These are the two centerpieces. And when it comes down to the food production, always keep an eye out on things that you actually can do. For example, here, the ranch is really nice, but you will need a steady income of any of these resources, which you can produce the items out of. A farm which uses fertile soil is really good. If you have fertile soil, don't pick it on a map, for example, which doesn't feature lots of fertile soil. The list goes on and on. Furnace here, for example, would require flour for that, so it's practically useless until you have the full production cycle going. But the skewers, on the other hand, are a very forgiving and easy recipe. Look for the easy and fulfillable recipes first, and the more complicated come later. In this game, generally, the balancing and the weighting is recipes like skewers are a little bit more resource intense, but they are simpler to combine. And recipes like the pie are less resource intense because flour is a really grateful resource in terms of density, but they are harder to achieve. So therefore, here goes. Stuff like that goes first and the other things go later. So, number 5, handling orders. Orders are really important. They are a steady source of reputation points, which you will require to not only win the game, but to whittle down the queen's impatience, which will kill you if you don't. And they are also source of the question what to pick here. So, to me personally, it's pretty simple. First up, if you have very high doubts that you will be able to fulfill that objective ever, don't pick it. This is really one of the things that I have experienced whenever I chose against that, because the rewards looked so juicy. I ended more often than not with the objective on my list unfinished when I ended the game. So instead, aim rather for the low-hanging fruit until you feel really comfortable with the systems. And here again, if you notice that you can't fulfill both objectives, here as a little bit of a guideline, items like parts and wildfire essences are pretty interesting because they are practically unproducible on your own. You can only buy them from outside sources or loot them. So these are really, really valuable. Next point, perks, things that give you permanent bonuses, are the next rung of the ladder for me personally. I find them actually in the very early game even less attractive than parts and such, but your mileage may vary. And population. Very, very powerful early game buff. More about that also later, but also a two-edged blade. Not necessarily do you want endless amounts of population, so on the later stages of the order list, you might maybe skip on the population rewards because you already have enough people. Either way, altogether, your orders should be always things that you fulfill, and avoid under all circumstances things that you cannot fulfill, and then only after aim for the rewards. The better you get at this game, the more you notice that none of these are really unfulfillable, and none of these are, or sometimes some are easier than others, but since this is also a pretty deep and intense system of the game, I find this a very good rule of thumb to get into the whole business. So, number 6, how to win. Well, this is actually quite easy. You fill that bar down below. And number 7, no, jokes aside, there's a couple of things that you need to do to win the game, and it's a weaving of things. First up, making people happy gives you points that win the game. Then fulfilling quests on these glades can give you reputation points. You also sometimes find stashes of items that you can turn into victory points. Then this is actually already the quintessence of sources to gain these reputation points. There's a last source of these: cornerstones. Sometimes you can draft cornerstones which produce reputation points for you. For example, some give you reputation points when you sell enough stuff. Altogether, you want to focus on one of these methods particularly, either making your people really happy or doing a lot of adventuring or trying to earn via trade or spicy cornerstones your thing. But I strongly recommend never to rely on only one income source of reputation alone, because all of these have sort of diminishing returns. When you do it via the happiness way, every time you earn a point of reputation, this little blue bar here goes a little bit higher because people's standards grow. Every time you finish something here on the map which yields reputation points, it's usually a one-time usage. You can't repeatedly use them. So also the trade-related point things, they require you to produce something which doesn't happen on its own. None of the ways to gain reputation points, or orders, it's also limited, are enough to win the game on its own. It's best served in a combination. Of course, here again, once you are getting good enough at the game, you can't force a victory in either direction. But at the beginning, I found it most easy to try to grab the low-hanging fruits of all the branches and then try to fill the last gap with whatever I can fulfill. Number 7, tips to handle hostility. So hostility is basically adding in a debuff to your people. You see down here the resolve number, it gets lowered the higher the hostility of the forest is. During the storm season, this gets multiplied. You get a higher debuff, the higher the hostility level, in short. So, the thing is, here's a couple of points that you need to follow. First up, woodcutting increases hostility, but it is the necessary evil that you really can't stop, except for storm season. Quite often I do remove my woodcutters for the storm season to get below that certain point. The other thing here is be fast. You see that you have a multiplier for passage of years. You have no time to dwindle, no time to waste, therefore try to never let just time pass by idly. This game really punishes you hard for that. Also, you notice that villages and open glades also give you a debuff. This means the larger your city grows and the more you explore, the more hostile the environment grows. Altogether, the easiest ways to manage these are to keep an eye out on every part of your growth and always grow as much as you need, but never mindless. But I have a couple of thoughts about these things later down the road. But overall, my highest recommendations for hostility management are: try to keep an eye out on all these cornerstones that lower hostility in some way. Here, for example, silent looting. Whenever I open a cache, my hostility is lowered by 15 points. There's various ways that lower hostility. These are absolutely valuable in every situation and 100% no-brainers to take if you can fulfill them. This is a super high profit thing. Hostility reduction is massive. The other thing that you always can do is at some point let the newcomers just be. You don't need to take them. This is just the same as with the drafts. Nothing bad will happen if you have your population and you don't increase. You're not forced to increase your population. If you have everything you need, don't pick up more than you need because, it's just like that. Okay, let's move on over to number 8, fuel and food. So, these are the two things that you never should run out of in that particular order. You need fuel, otherwise the fire goes out, you die. Once food goes out, your people will not immediately die. They will pack up stacks of hunger, and when these are too high, we'll see them here if they are around, they will die. So these two resources are the most important ones to gather. Simple food like this is the lowest rung of the ladder. This will make people content. They will eat of it and stay happy with it. But you want to get those complex foods, pies, skewers, and such. Not only are these more resource efficient in the production, you always get more units of complex food than you put units of simple food in, the higher the efficiency of the building, the better the ratio here goes. But altogether, you want to focus on these things first and foremostly when you think about what's right now important. And only if these 2 points are somewhat fulfilled, you should think about expanding into other directions. This is the most pressing matter, and if you skip out on one of these two, you will most likely die in a year or two later. Number 9, Expansion 101. So I wanted to drop down a couple of things that I personally think are really important in terms of glade opening and such. First up, don't shy away from opening up dangerous glades quickly. The first dangerous glade for your city is usually a really, really rewardful one, and even if it is complicated to fulfill the quest, most quests don't kill you outright when you fail to fulfill the timer the first time, and the items that you require can be acquired via the market or by just gathering and focusing a little bit more on the items that you can collect on the map. Either way, dangerous glades are the most valuable ones because you get a much lower debuff. As you see there, you get 30 points of debuff for a dangerous glade and 15 points of debuff for a small glade. When we compare the sizes, we do notice that we get much more real estate for 1 point per point of hostility, so to speak, on these ones, with the caveat that we'll have to deal with some problems there. Either way, when it comes down to expansion, here the most important thing for me is never try to expand if there's no good reason to do so. If you don't need any resources or resource caches, if you have stuff to grow into, so to speak, go for that first. But if you have a good reason, because you need more reputation points, because you are on the brink of finishing the game and such, this is really a good reason to keep clobbering open these things. But really important, while the quests on the dangerous glades often are really easy to fulfill if you take some time and thought into it, you know, the resources that you require are never too drastic. Forbidden glades are something else. Go for them if you have a good supply of metal, tools, and other high-grade goods, or a lot of amber to buy these goods, because the fallout of these events, if not handled carefully, they are quite the opposite of what I just said. They can easily finish off your colony because there's just such nasty things that can happen. But the rule of thumb here is quite easy with the expansion. Pick as much as you need. Once you notice that you are running out of key resources, keep expanding. If you notice that you have small glades around you and you have a hostility budget to spend, they are still worth it, because nowadays, in previous versions that wasn't, there are resources that can only spawn on small glades that are really helpful. But altogether, if you need a big chunk of resources for inspiration, what to draft or such, dangerous glades are the best way to go. So number 10, a little few more words about population. I already talked about it a little bit in the hostility department, but I had that question quite often: how much population should I have and how much population should I take? Here's a couple of rules of thumb. In the early game, you basically cannot have too much population, because in the first 3 or 4 years, there are so many things that you want to do, and the faster you get them done, the more your scaling will allow you to go harder into the other half of the game. In the later 50% of the game, so the other half, so to speak, this rule inverts, sort of, because all of a sudden population becomes a burden, and in many maps you have really drastic high-level forest mysteries where you really want to keep the hostility low. You don't want to grow that hard anymore. So once you notice that you have all the slots in your buildings fulfilled, and the first couple of people you notice, I have 5, 6 people that I don't really know what to do with, this is a point where you should stop hiring people altogether and consider doing it for the remainder of the game. There's no particular bonus for more people, except for one thing: the more people you have happy at once, the faster you gain reputation per second when they are over their maximum reputation point. It's just a matter of speed, though. They don't gain more in terms of quantity. They'll just gain it faster. So I hope this helps you to give you a little bit of a guideline. I think, especially on the population part, this is a very, very deep topic where I think for experienced players and people that go into the higher levels of difficulty, this might be a sort of an ill advice because you can do a lot of mental gymnastics and interesting strategies with population control. I just wanted to say that as an outro. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Let me know in the comment section what you thought about this video. If you have anything to ask in or add in, feel free to. Leave a like, leave a subscribe, consider supporting Icon Gaming financially via YouTube channel memberships, donations, or whatever tickles your fancy in the description box below. And of course, I want to say a big thanks to all of these supporters here. I really appreciate you guys, and a big thanks to you for watching this video up until the very end. It's awesome that you took your time, and I hope it helped you out, and have a great day. Bye-bye.